Hello and welcome to Tools of a Civil War Soldier. My name is John Miller. I'm the Executive Director here at the Shippensburg Historical Society. And today, as you probably guessed, we're going to talk a little bit about the equipment as well as the uniform of a Civil War soldier who served with the Union Army. Shippensburg, being a small town, had men fight from 1861 all the way to the close of the war in 1865. In August of 1862, Company D of what would become the 130th Pennsylvania was raised right here in Shippensburg. They marched to Harrisburg, where they were officially mustered into military service, and from there they transferred to Washington, D.C., where they would begin receiving training as far as School of the Soldier. School of the Soldier is where you basically learn how to stand as a soldier, as well as how to fire a musket and how to maneuver within the ranks. Many of these men from Shippensburg, their average age would have been anywhere from 16 to 25 years of age, weighing about approximately 140 to 145 pounds, and they may have stood anywhere from 5 foot tall 5 inches to 5 foot tall 8 inches. That pretty much made up the average Civil War soldier. When these men went into training, it's not like basic training today where you take weeks or even months. These guys literally received training in a very little amount of time. So for the 130th Pennsylvania, newly mustered into the Union Army, when the threat of the Maryland campaign, when the Confederate Army decided to invade Maryland, resulting in the Battle of Antietam, without even a month experience under their belts, they received their baptism of fire on September 17th, 1862, at a place called Bloody Lane along the banks of the Antietam Creek. From there, they would fight at Fredericksburg before being mustered out of service and returning home. Other Shippensburg men fought on the fields of Gettysburg in 1863, as well as in the Wilderness and Spotsylvania campaigns in 1864. From there, a lot of those men served in the infantry, perhaps the artillery, as well as the cavalry. Now, I am dressed as your average Union infantry man. I have my uniform, my blanket roll, which is pretty much has some personal items in it, as well as a ground cloth inside of it. I have my cap pouch, cartridge box, bayonet, and bayonet scabbard. I have my canteen and my haversack, and my haversack is where food would be placed at. Approximately 3 days of what they would call rations. A lot of this terminology we're going to break down further as this video goes. But real quickly, I just wanted to go through the motions without firing a musket inside my building, of course, but just to show you how this operated and how it was loaded. And they did that through a series of moves called load in 9 times. So it took 9 times, or basically 9 steps in order to load this, and then there were 3 additional steps on top of that in order to fire it. So the first command would be to load. And what the soldier does is he takes the rifle, brings it to the front of his body. His right hand, he will quickly grasp to his cartridge box. From there, the second command, take cartridge, is given. He will reach inside his cartridge box and he will pull out a cartridge. From there, the third command, tear cartridge. Fourth command, charge cartridge. And that's where he's taking the black powder first, followed by the projectile, and putting it into the barrel. From there, draw rammer, 2 moves. Ram cartridge. What he is doing is he's taking the black powder as well as the projectile, or in this case the bullet, and he is compressing it as tight as he can to the breech of the weapon. Return rammer. Prime. He'll reach into his cap pouch, pull out a small percussion cap where he'll place it on the cone of the rifle. From there, shoulder arms. Shoulder arms lets the company officers know who in the ranks are ready for the next 3 commands, which in this case would be ready, aim, and then fire. Out on the battlefield, a good soldier should be able to fire this rifle musket 3 times per minute although a lot of times battlefield conditions would not allow for that. So let's go ahead and break down the tools and the equipment of what it is that I'm wearing. And at the end of the presentation, if you're interested, I can send you a worksheet for your students or your youth group to work on. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. And this is known as a forage cap. And this is a typical type of headgear that were issued out to Union soldiers during the American Civil War. This would be worn most likely with the fatigue uniform. However, because of its durability and its comfort, a lot of Union soldiers would wear this instead of their dress hardy hats, which I do not have an example to show. So this is a museum quality reproduction of a Union soldier's frock coat. This is the dress uniform for any enlisted soldier. It's got the blue piping here to indicate a branch of service, which in this case would be infantry. Same way with the piping up here. And then on the inside, if you notice, it's partially lined. So there's no lining here, but over here, you have the lining. And of course, you can see the stitches here. This represents quilting. And what they did was they took cotton batting and put it between the actual wool layer of the jacket and the liner, just for a little bit more comfort for the wearer. This is the Union soldier's fatigue uniform jacket. And as you can tell, it's a lot different than the frock coat. This jacket here was very popular among enlisted men during the American Civil War, just because of the fact that it was not as cumbersome as the frock coat, but it also reminded the Union soldier of the regular traditional sack coats that were worn by civilian men. And as you can see, it's lined with dormant flannel. So if you were on fatigue duty, which meant maybe you were doing something within camp, this is the jacket that you definitely want to wear. And here's an example of a pair of Union trousers that would have been worn by a Civil War soldier. These museum quality reproductions are actually based off of the J.T. Martin, which was a contractor out of New York. You got the button-up flies here, pockets, and also you have a set of braces. And of course, we know braces today as suspenders. This is a close-up of the type of footwear that were issued to Civil War soldiers. Doesn't matter if you're in the Northern Army or in the Southern Army, footwear for the most part was patterned after what was known as the booty, or what would become known as the brogan. So some of the things that would have been issued out by the Ordnance Department would be what they would refer to as accoutrements. So here we have the basic accoutrements set for a Civil War soldier. Doesn't matter if you're fighting for the North or the South, everybody pretty much had a cartridge box, a cap pouch, some type of belt with buckle, as well as a scabbard to hold the bayonet. And that pretty much makes up the accoutrements as far as the leather gear that would be issued out by the Ordnance Department. So here you have the Civil War soldier's belt and buckle, a cap pouch, and when you open up the cap pouch, what this has is, you can see we have some wool, and that kind of keeps the percussion caps from bouncing out. And also you would have a tool in there to prevent fouling inside the cone of the musket. And since they were kind of small, I decided to go ahead and print them out. So here's an enlarged, what they would call nipple pick, that would go inside of here. And then here's an enlarged photograph of what percussion caps look like, and those would have also went in there. So remember when I was saying that cartridge boxes, usually you have a pack of 10 ammunition that's pre-wrapped. Well, there would be an 11th tube, and there would be 12 percussion caps inside that. So the ammunition goes into the cartridge box, then the Civil War soldier would immediately put his percussion caps into there. Why did they give you 12 when they only issue out 10 rounds? Again, because of fouling, or because of maybe the powder got damp. That's why they gave you 12. And then here you have the scabbard. Of course, the brass tip here. And the scabbard, all that does is it holds the bayonet. So let's go ahead and examine the cartridge box itself. As you can see, it's not very wide. It's made out of leather. On the back side here, you could throw it through a belt, or in the Union Army, they commonly wore what was called a cartridge box belt. Attached to the cartridge box belt that would go on the front of the wearer is what they call a breastplate. And as you can see, it's an eagle carrying the arrows as well as an olive branch. And then on the front here, to kind of support and give it kind of durability, is you have another buckle right here that basically goes into the cartridge box, and then after that it's held in place by another piece of leather. This is for when you're on the march or in the field of battle. It kind of helps to keep the flap closed. Now, cartridge boxes, for the most part, like I said earlier, this one's made out of leather. However, some in the Confederate Army toward the later part of the war, some of them were made out of painted canvas. But still, cartridge boxes have, no matter what material it's made out of, it has one purpose, and that is to hold ammunition. So you would hold 40 rounds of ammunition in a cartridge box. So here we have cartridge 10s. Ammunition would be in the form of a paper cartridge. And basically what you do is you take that and you would bite it off or tear it off using your teeth. And that would go into, starting with the powder first down the barrel of the rifle, and then finally your projectiles up here. So when you're issued ammunition, it comes in packs of 10 rounds, plus you have an extra tube that has 12 percussion caps. So when you open these up, these would go into the cartridge box like that, and then the unopened packs would go into this component right here, and that is called the 10. And as you can see, we have 2 10s. This pocket here is pretty much the toolbox of the cartridge box. And when you open this up, you have all the tools necessary to make sure that your weapon is in working condition. So here, I'm going to put this down. So here we have what's called a combination wrench. So you have your screwdriver here. That way you can take your gun, anything that's wrong with it or to repair, you can take it apart this way. And then you have what's called a nipple or the cone, and this is the wrench that would remove that. So definitely an important piece. This here is what they call a mini ball puller. And what you would do is you would attach your ramrod to this, and we'll figure out the terminologies here for what you can't see later on when I bring the rifle out. But the ramrod at one end has a threaded portion of the rod, and you would screw that on, insert that down into the barrel, and then from there, this would go right into this, and you would keep turning it until it turned no more, and then from there you could extract this bullet from your gun. Black powder, in many ways, black powder is an excellent resource. However, due to, say, if it's raining and your powder gets wet, it doesn't go off, it doesn't combust. And because of that, you may have to extract a mini ball in order to put a fresh round into it. Another item that you would have also that would attach to the end of the ramrod is what they call a wiper. And basically what you would do is if there's any fouling, you can run this down, obviously, but you can also put a piece of cloth on here and run it down in order to clean out the inside bore of your muzzle loader. With regards to ammunition, like I said, most of the times they carried cartridges in form like this. There's two variations to ammunition: a mini ball or a musket ball or a round ball. Most of the ammunitions that you find on the battlefields, a lot of them are with this. These are not as accurate coming out of a muzzleloader, especially a rifled. And think of a quarterback. When a quarterback throws the ball, he spins. You get that spin, and that's what allows the receiver to catch the ball at greater distances. A quarterback could not throw that nearly as accurate downfield to a receiver because of the fact that when this fires, it doesn't grab a hold of the rifling all that well. Whereas when the rifle is fired, all the pressure goes right inside of here, and it expands this base and it catches a hold of the rifling. So those two there are pretty much the types of ammunition that you're going to see that would go into these cartridge boxes. One of the more important pieces to a Civil War soldier's field kit would be this bag right here. This is known as a haversack, and basically it's a painted cloth. The paint really acts as a waterproofer. And inside the bag, and I'll flip it around so you can see it, you have an inner pocket here that detaches with buttons. But basically, this haversack is used for carrying 3 days worth of rations. Rations could be anything from like hardtack to salt pork, coffee, sugar, whatever the commissary has on hand. And a Civil War soldier would then go ahead and wear the haversack using this strap here thrown over, most likely his left shoulder, depending on if it gets in the way of the cartridge box or not. Obviously, he can definitely wear it over on his right shoulder. Then you come over here, and we have a couple bags here. Now, as soldiers would be rationed their food items, you have food items that are also being shipped from home to the front. And a lot of those items could have came in what they call poke bags, or the soldier may have kept poke bags just to go ahead and put his rations in. That way it's not at the bottom of his haversack. And here you can see we have some roasted coffee beans. Now, coffee beans is a very common issue to a Civil War soldier, regardless if he's fighting for the Union or fighting for the Confederacy. One of the big things is that you have to grind these up in order to make coffee. So what they would do is they would place coffee beans into maybe their tin cup or into their tin pots. And then from there you have to crush them using either the back end of your bayonet or maybe the buttstock of your rifle, or even if you have a couple of stones. Once you ground your coffee beans up, Then you can go ahead and pour them into, if you were lucky enough to have such an item, you can then pour them into your coffee pot. Now this one here is an example of one that was used during the Civil War. In fact, I purchased this reproduction through the museum that's in Wisconsin. And it's a pretty neat contraption. It doesn't take up a whole lot of space when I carry my knapsack into the field, or at least when I used to. But all you would do is go ahead and fill up to water here, put your ground coffee beans inside here, and then from there you can go ahead and place this next to the fire. And then as the coffee and the water are boiling together, then that produces or releases the oils from those beans. So as far as like a typical Civil War soldier, he would have been lucky to have something like this with him. Now, obviously, if you were an officer, this might be definitely part of your kit. And of course, it's made out of tin, just like the tin cup here. And this again is also an original, it's a reproduction of an original example that came out of the Wisconsin Museum. You have a tin plate. And if you notice, there is a theme here. Most of the metal that you see is made from tin. Tin is very durable. When you pretty much burn, you get the silt from the fire on that. That pretty much acts as a rust deterrent. But because of how cheap it is and how durable it is, plus every town had a tinsmith. So that's one reason why tin was chosen, because of the fact that it's a lot lighter and a lot easier to maintain. Now, if I had items shipped from home, say, I can obviously have them in boxes or within containers such as this, or even poke bags. So this here could be my lard container, or it could be a container used for butter. It was just a really nice way to basically carry this in my haversack, or if I didn't have room for it, I can carry it in my knapsack without getting the contents spilled all over. And then we have your utensils. So we have an original Civil War period knife, fork, as well as a spoon here. And the problem with these is that when you carry these into the field, it's not that they take up a lot of room in my haversack, it's just it's a little cumbersome because of the length of them. So what a lot of Civil War soldiers would do is they would wait until the sutlers caught up with them, and then from there they may buy items such as this. And this is called a fork, knife, and spoon combo. And I'm going to show you how this actually works. So you have these items here, okay? Like I said, it's not a big deal in my haversack because I have my plate and stuff with me. But sometimes it's nice to have things that are compact. And what do I mean by compact? Well, it's kind of like what this is based off of. So this is your spoon, fork, and knife combo. And think of this as kind of like the Swiss Army knife of the time period. So Civil War soldiers would buy this. So this is something that's not issued by the military. And the nice thing is that it opens up. So you have your spoon, here's your fork, and then here's your knife. And then from there, you just basically separate the two. And then you can basically eat, cut, or even sip. And then when you were done, you would go ahead and put these back together. And of course, fold them down and voila. And then from there, you can go ahead and put this into your pocket, your knapsack, or you can just throw it into your haversack. So this is kind of neat. They come in different shapes, different sizes. I've seen several different models. Some of them were just a spoon and basically a fork, but they're just really unique, and you can see the difference in size. With regards to extra items that possibly were carried by Civil War soldiers. Now, when you're in the field, you have to carry everything, and everything becomes cumbersome when you're marching 15 to 20, 25 miles a day. So what a lot of the soldiers like to do was to basically condense. They had messes. Messes were usually between anywhere from 4 to 12 people that would take responsibility. So one day, one guy would carry the frying pan. The next day, he may be carrying the big tin pot. Following that, maybe he was carrying the cast iron pot, whatever, whatnot. They would take turns. Now, in a form of recycling, some of the Civil War soldiers did reuse items. So for an example, we have here a canteen half. And a canteen half can substitute as a plate as well as a small bowl. And what you would do is you would put this over top of the fire or near the fire, and then as the contents were getting finished, you would take a stick or a fork or something, and you could lift that right up off of the fire. And then from there you can set it off to the side to cool. So with that being said, if you carried one plate and one bowl in your haversack, this could possibly replace the two, eliminating 2 items. Now, here we have a can that used to contain peaches. And what we did here is that you basically take the can after your contents are gone, you poke holes into them, and then after that you put like this wire handle through it. What you've done now is that you have a boiler. So you can use this to boil pretty much any type of foods. You can make coffee with this. You can use this as a cup. So with this particular tool here, you basically have eliminated the need of a lot of kitchen functions. These here are really good to cook over the fire, especially when you have a bayonet, and just pretend like the fire is underneath of there, and this bayonet is in the ground, and there you go. And then once you were done, you could just basically lift up the bayonet and then remove the contents from the fire. So these are some of the items that Civil War soldiers may carry on them as far as food preparation. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop the video, and we're going to have your team leader discuss what types of foods do you think Civil War soldiers would have ate, or if you were on campaign in the military living out of your haversack, what type of foods would you carry? Another interesting item that would go kind of hand in hand with the haversack that was issued out to any Civil War soldier, no matter if he's fighting for the Union Army or for the Southern Army, is a canteen. You can go several days without food in order to survive. And a lot of the Civil War soldiers, in order to lighten their loads, basically they would eat, in some cases, eat all 3 days worth of their rations within one day and just kind of go hungry for the next. But you could not go several days without fresh water. In a canteen here, it's pretty simple. You have a leather strap, and then of course you have a cork stopper that would go into the top here. And a lot of people think just because this has a gray covering over top of it, this would represent maybe something from the Confederate Army. It does not. Basically, this is a jeans cloth top. And as the Union Army was preparing for war, there were shortages in indigo blue, which was imported in from like areas of South Carolina and the South. So in order to save material for uniforms, what the Union Army did was convert it to gray canteen coverings. Other people say that the reason the military did that was to give it a more uniformed look on the wearer, and that is actually correct. This in no way was meant to be an insulator, nor was it meant to reflect sunlight from hitting the hot tin that was on here, but this was more along the lines to make the canteen look more uniformed with the wearer. Here we have a Civil War soldier's knapsack. And this is basically a backpack that's worn on the back of a soldier. You have your sack portion of the knapsack, and then right here, this pretty much is the main compartment here, known as the trunk. And then as you can see, you have heavy straps up front that would go over the wearer's shoulders. And then up here, these notches here are for leather straps that would go through to hold a greatcoat, which is a type of winter gear. As you can see, this is the knapsack that's fully opened. And immediately upon opening the knapsack, you have what's called a gum blanket. And basically what a soldier would do is he would unfold that and put that on the ground. And that would pretty much prevent the moisture from the ground coming up, making him cold. Or if it's storming or raining outside, he could definitely wrap this around him to help keep him dry. And then in this compartment here, known as the trunk, we have a shelter half. And basically 2 soldiers would unfold these because each one may have one. And then from there they could make a small tent out of it. Now keep in mind, this is full campaign mode here. Obviously, if you're on light marching orders, you probably would not carry your knapsack with you because of the fact that a lot of these can weigh anywhere up to, let's put it this way, the average Civil War soldier in the Union Army in 1862 carried upwards to about 35 to 45 pounds worth of stuff, including the rifle. And then during the Pennsylvania campaign, in 1863, they carried upwards to about maybe 20 to 30 pounds. What's left over in the trunk here is a blanket, and to substitute a knapsack, you can always take the blanket, put some personal items in, roll it up, and throw it over your shoulder and wear it that way. Over here you have the sack portion of the knapsack, and really this is where you're going to carry any of those personal items. In this case, I have like a spare set of cotton socks. I have my underdrawers. And then I have my federal issue shirt, which is basically it's what they call a Dammit flannel. And then any other small trinkets, such as maybe a pack of playing cards or a writing set, or maybe perhaps extra food rations, I could also carry into that. And that there pretty much is the knapsack. Some of the items that soldiers may have carried with them inside of their knapsacks could be a variation of some of these items that you see here on the table. Now, remember, as a Civil War soldier, you have to carry everything with you all the time. So the more you carry, the more weight that you're going to have to carry along with it. So one of the really cool items I have here is my hygiene kit. So I have, as you can see, a very well worn piece of cloth here that was crocheted. And I use this basically to clean, my pans, plates, cups out, or if I'm cooking around the fire, I'll use it to grab a hold of items and take them off the fire. But this is just a very interesting tool for me to carry, just because of the fact that, number one, it was actually made by my wife, and this would have been something that would have been sent to a Civil War soldier. So we have our washcloth, so to speak. Now, if you notice during the time period, you have a lot of variations in facial hair. So as the war progressed, either a lot of the soldiers would have been clean shaved or they would have full beards, just because of the fact that you have to carry extra things with you. So here I have a straight razor. And basically you would open that up, and that's what you use to shave the whiskers off your face. I also have a small camp mirror. And this is very useful too because of the fact that it's small, it's compact, and it's something that I can place inside of my pocket. And then as far as my teeth are concerned, I have my toothbrush with, it's made out of bone and horsehair for the bristles. And I also have tooth powder. Think of baking soda. I don't know if anybody still does that, but some of the adults probably remember brushing their teeth with baking soda. And basically that's what this is. It's a powder that has a little bit of a mint flavor to it. And I carry my hygiene set in yet another poke bag. That way I can kind of keep everything together. Another tool that was very useful to the Civil War soldier is his housewife. You're issued so many allowances for clothing per year. After that, it was up to you to pay for it. So you want to make sure that your uniforms are in tip-top condition. So what I have here is a housewife made out of wool. So I have a pocket here, and inside that pocket I carry spare needles, thread, and also a small ball of beeswax. And what the beeswax does is you take your thread and you run it through the beeswax, and it'll help keep your thread from knotting up on you. And because of the fact that in the summertime beeswax kind of gets very sticky, I have it wrapped inside this small cloth right here. I also have a small pair of scissors. And then if you notice here, I have variations of different needles. And when I'm finished with it, all I got to do is just simply roll that up and tie these ends. And as you can see, it's very small and compact. This is not going to take up a lot of space in your knapsack, as an example. So that was the housewife. Now, other items that soldiers could have carried, and this would have been sent from home as well, scarves. Any kind of knitted or crocheted items, especially with wintertime that is around the corner, or even if it is wintertime, things like this would help to keep the soldiers warm. So we have here a scarf that would have been worn around the wearer's neck. Other items that could have been sent to the front from home could be knitted socks, for an example. Even heavier styles of underwear that are made out of, instead of a regular plain old cotton, but more along the lines of a flannel. Those were items that were definitely important. And of course, being seasonal, it's not like you're necessarily going to have to march with a lot of this stuff. Here we have matches. And of course, down here at the bottom, you can see what's left of my striker. Matches, of course, are used to lit candles or to light candles to start the fires with. And then for games, Civil War soldiers love to play games on their downtime. If you think about it, about 90% of a Civil War soldier's life is spent in camp, and about another 9% on top of that is marching, and then the remaining 1% is in pure terror. And of course, stuff like this kind of took the edge off of boardism in camp. So as far as camp life is concerned, you had various kinds of card games. Dice was a very popular game, or even writing letters home to a loved one. And then when you're in camp, this is what they call kind of like a smoking cap or a camp cap. This way you don't have to wear your military headgear, and it's a little more comfortable. And then you have the billfold. And of course, the billfold itself is made out of leather. And this is something that soldiers would have definitely carried, not in their knapsack, but most likely upon themselves. And here we have a letter. And then after that we have, if I can get it out of here, currency, paper currency. So here's the main weapon for an infantryman. This is known as a rifled musket. The reason it gets its term rifled musket is because of the rifling inside the barrel and because of the fact that you have to load it from the muzzle here. You got your front sight here, the barrel bands, trigger guard, trigger, lock, hammer, and then right here is the cone, or what's referred to as the nipple. When you put that percussion cap onto this, when you squeeze the trigger, the hammer comes down, ignites the powder charge that has basically been compressed back here, and it sends the bullet flying out the barrel. For foul weather days, this is known as a tampion. Basically, you would put this into the gun just like that. That prevents water from getting down into the barrel. And then here you have the ramrod itself. You can put a patch through here to clean it, but sometimes the patch will get this stuck inside the barrel. So the other opportunity would be basically to use this threaded end here and put your wiper on with a small patch and run it down. And then for the metal parts to keep from rusting out, they basically used a combination of kind of like ashes and silt. And then of course here is your bayonet.